Hello again, my name is Dr. Bill Johnson. I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Exploring Our Schools. Today we're going to focus on a rather unique program at Southside High School, one which, quite frankly, I'm not going to get involved in trying to explain, but I'm going to ask one of our guests who are with me today to spend the first few moments of our session here trying to tell us exactly what it is that we do with BioArt. So it's Chris Karatkin. He was an art teacher and has been with us now for 17 years. Not to focus exclusively on you, we have two seniors who are with us also. Lizzie Flood, thank you very much for joining us, and Ryan Weber. So we're going to get to you in a minute, but first of all, I'm going to ask Mr. Karatkin, if you wouldn't mind, spending a few minutes just kind of talking about BioArt and where it fits in the art program and what's it all about.
Definitely. So, the big question is, what is BioArt? And essentially, in simple terms, it's the integration of biology, earth sciences into art. And even though it's the mix of science and art, the weight is on the art and the aesthetics of art. And I have some images of the lab which we created at Southside. So I had the opportunity to visit the School of Visual Arts, where they have a professional lab. And I went there actually with Ms. Broder from one of the elementary schools. And we took a tour, and that's where I kind of pulled ideas from their lab. And we also looked at some images related to RISD's Nature Lab as well. And I kind of combined the two to create the BioLab at Southside. I applied for a grant, and I received it through the Ed Foundation. And it was a really generous grant, and we're appreciative of it.
So we're looking at the lab right now.
And this is the lab, yeah. So the first image you'll see is the room. And, the way I designed it, I didn't want it to be really separate from the rest of the art room. I want it to be a type of thing where you can access any of the materials at any point, walk to the back of the room, pick up a plant, pick up an object, and work with it. I didn't want it to feel separate from the art-making process, whether you're painting or drawing or sculpting. If you look at the next image, one of the things I wanted to focus on was the use of plants. I have a specific interest in working with plants. So this is a plant growth cart, and I brought in a collection of assorted, interesting kind of plants students can work from. And as you can see in the next slide, students are working on botanical drawings, and these are freshmen. This is Brooke Warner, who's working on one of the botanical illustrations. And the next one is Kira McDonald, who's also working from one of the plants. And these are highly detailed, direct observation, kind of watercolor paintings. Next one is one of my students, Chidera, as well, working from one of the plants. I try to bring in stuff that's unique, interesting, and not the typical plants you're going to see. Something that's conducive to painting or drawing and inspiring, art. And in the next image, you can see there's a sorted insect specimens. Those came from Evolution down in Soho. If you ever get a chance to check that out, it's a great place. But I wanted actual insects to be, in the classroom rather than a image to work with. Something that students can sit down and really see and look at the details. And they're beautiful specimens to work with. Also have some jarred specimens in the next slide here. The classic frog, right? Something you could draw or paint, some shells, different aquatic kind of species. And we also have some skull replicas, which is in the next slide. So some really beautiful, authentic casts, right? Students can sit down and work with.
Appropriate for this time of the year. Right?
Yeah, exactly, right.
Halloween.
Next one is actually a grizzly bear and a coyote replica. Right, so it's great to be able to sit down and look at this thing, spin it around, look at it from different angles, and work directly from the object. Next one is a dolphin and a frog. And after that, we have the digital microscope. So this one is the digital compound microscope, which we have in front of us as well. And that's something which a lot of students have used. We've integrated this into IB Art. Some of the photo classes have used the microscopes, painting and drawing 1, painting and drawing 2, but really any of the art teachers can utilize these materials, and even if a science teacher wanted to utilize them for their class, it's available for them as well. In the next image, we have what I call micro paintings. So with this microscope, you can take a photo directly from it, and you can print it up, and students are working on little tiny micro paintings in the classroom. Next image is really interesting. This is Stephanie Wetstein. She brought in a chameleon, actually, which she got off the internet, and she was taking photographs of it, and you can see in the next image We get some really amazing photographs. This is the stereo microscope. So you get really great resolution. You can also alter the image once it's on the computer. And just to convey the idea that what students are studying in the BioArt lab and at Southside, the next image is Kirsten Groff. She is a freshman at Savannah College of Art and Design, and she's taking a scientific illustration course, and this is one of her watercolor paintings of a lionfish. So this is completely applicable to what students will study in college.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it gives us kind of a well-rounded view. So we don't have a course specifically about it, but as you just talked about, it's really integrated into
Yeah, it's
courses.
integrated throughout any of the classes and available to all the teachers. Yeah.
So now let's talk about the experts. Two people who have just started a club, as a matter of fact, from what I understand, right?
My co-presidents.
Huh?
My co-presidents.
So if you wouldn't mind telling me a little bit, Ryan, you want to start maybe, if you wouldn't mind? Talk a little bit about how you got interested in this and why you think it's worthy of putting together a club like this.
Well, I've always had an interest in art and science, and you don't really find time to incorporate the two together. And BioArt Club is basically our club, but with a scientific edge to it. So students who have both interests can sort of come together and work on
Does it give you a
projects.
different sensitivity? I mean, let's just looking even at the skulls that you had at the display. I mean, sometimes studying the anatomy from the inside out gives you a different sense of what it is that you are either drawing or painting.
Yeah, of course. I mean, in science classes, we rarely get like hands-on materials. Like we don't really see skeletons and taxidermy things. So it gives us access to like, aesthetics and things that we can actually touch and see.
Right.
I also agree with Ryan, and I've always had an interest in art and marine biology, so I like to incorporate that into my pieces.
Now, both of you science students as well? I mean, you have so just kind of talking about sometime down the road. I mean, both of you are seniors and thinking about what's going to happen to me next year. Do you think this is going to have any impact on what it is that you choose to do or where you're going to go?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even if my path didn't exactly correlate with BioArt, it's just the idea of taking like interests, like polar interests, and being able to combine them and like apply them together and sort of take control and create your own thing.
Yeah, and I'll definitely take this into consideration when I'm like thinking about what I'm going to do in the future. And yeah, because I like it. It's very interesting.
You know, if you wouldn't mind, I know we've really filled the table with lots of things. This is like show and tell in elementary school, but
Yeah.
at any rate, maybe you could just kind of tell us a little bit about some of the work that you've done. Lizzie, I think this is yours, is it
Yeah.
not? Yes.
For this piece, I used a sample slide, which was a spinal cord neuron, like multipolar neuron, and I used that with this compound microscope. And I would have to like put the slide underneath and center it, and then find out which magnification is the best. And when I took a screenshot to put on the computer and print, I painted that image with acrylic paint as the background. And I also had to mix in some water to like make it have a watercolor effect so it's smoother.
What I like about this piece is that sometimes a BioArt work of art, it doesn't jump out at you as being necessarily BioArt. So you wouldn't know necessarily that the background is, an image from a microscope, from a spinal cord, which I kind of like. It's subtle, and a lot of BioArt is like that. And I think that's good. You don't always want it to scream out science. You sort of want the art aspect of it to kind of take over and know that there's an underlying element of science to it.
But it's just not trying to replicate the environment in which
Right.
these creatures live. It's actually merging to,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
So very interesting. And I don't think I would recognize that as being a spinal cord.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So there's a level of sophistication that you need, I guess, to interpret and understand what
It
you're
is.
looking at.
Yeah, I tried
Yeah.
to add a twist to it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, this is definitely more on the college level in terms of the ideas and the execution of the projects. It is more on the college level.
All right, so you're up next, Ryan.
Okay.
I notice there's another piece here.
Well, this is more of a visual representation. It's going to be an experiment I'm actually going to carry out. And I'm going to take a fish tank, and I'm going to create with a series of spheres, like a little ecosystem, and then I'm going to submerge it in water. And the idea behind this is like taking a terrarium, like a traditional terrarium, and taking it a step further by completely isolating it underneath water. And a lot of research is going to be involved because I have to like find the balance between animal species and plant species that will survive and that will like live together peacefully, and I don't make sure that nothing takes over the entire ecosystem. So it's a lot of research involved, and the execution will be kind of difficult, but it'll be worth trying.
I'm not sure I'm ready to live there yet, but obviously, what have you decided that you wanted to place? I noticed down there, it looks like a colony of ants. Is that what?
Yeah, well, plants, they need CO2, so a terrarium would not survive too long because I need a source of CO2 and a source of oxygen, so they'll sort of feed off of each other.
So when you submerge it entirely, I mean, there is some science involved in this thing
of
to
course, yeah.
get a sense to see how these things grow with either a limited amount of CO2.
Yeah, it's all about finding the balance between like the gases and the nutrients, and it's a lot of research involved. I'll probably have to replicate some sort of ecosystem that's already exists in the world.
Right. So that's the science piece, but the art piece that you're trying to, how do we put the two together in this?
Well, I think that it'll just be sort of beautiful having, like seeing like a terrarium and plants and like living organisms like underneath water. It's just a very it's like a juxtaposition of life, and I think it'll be interesting to photograph possibly, or maybe play with the water with dyes. There's a lot of possibilities.
Work with video as well.
Yeah.
And get some really interesting video shots from it. Yeah, so, even though it may start out as almost like a sculptural sort of science project looking type of piece, in the end result could be a video or a series of photos.
Yeah, lots of possibilities.
So going up to the lab again, I mean, is this where you do most of your work? How much interest do you have in the club? I mean, is there
A lot of
just the
interest.
two of
I
you?
mean, I personally, I love plants. I have a collection at home, so I always like to walk around and see how all the plants are doing and see what's growing.
And how they change over time?
Yeah, of course.
And allowing that to reflect in
Yeah.
I presume, in the art that you produce as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. You do the same thing, right?
Yeah, I also have a large interest in plants and underwater creatures because they have an interesting texture to them, which is different than like above water, of course.
The texture is very different. You're
Yeah.
absolutely correct. That's
Yeah,
right.
and it poses many different painting challenges. Painting something like that is quite a challenge. Definitely. And these guys also are my lab assistants. Ryan is often in the class tending to my plants, which have different diseases, right?
Yeah.
He takes care of that aspect.
Pests and all that.
Pests, right.
Well, you can put them under the microphone and study them as well.
We
That'd be good.
can. We definitely can.
Right.
Exactly.
Find out which disease affects which plant and how it affects
Sure.
it in what
Yeah, it's
environment.
a lot of work taking care of all these plants. You have to make sure that there's no pests, no diseases, and
Yeah.
water
Yeah.
them.
And I need the help, so that's why I have the students come in, and I really like them to run it.
Yeah.
I also had a student last year, Rebecca Brand, who was experimenting with grafting with plants and creating, hybrids of plants, and that's something that's, has gone on for quite a while, and that's something definitely that could play a role in the realm of bioart.
So what does the
as well.
science department feel about it? Like you're intruding a little bit into their world?
I think they're okay with it, and once again, these materials are available for them to use. The comments I've had briefly been positive. I think they find it interesting. I think it is something that can be a little confusing to people outside the realm of art. Even myself, when I first walked into the lab at SVA, it's different. It is new, and it is cutting edge stuff, and. And it's been great to be able to bring something that is so contemporary to Southside. And for me, it just opened up a whole new world of art, and for my students. And it has a great enthusiasm to it. I see it with these kids, and it's the ideas they have of meshing art and science, which they bring to the program, which is the key. Because, I am an art teacher, I'm an artist. So they're bringing often the science ideas to me, and then we're kind of talking about the aesthetics of how we can create a work of art. So it's exciting stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting, I guess maybe the word that I'm trying to find right now is, let's say, sensitivity. I mean, as a scientist, your view of the world is very different than it is as an artist.
Yeah.
How do you merge those two? So you develop a third level of sensitivity, which really, as you were just saying,
That's-
merging
yeah.
the two
Well,
together.
I think that scientists and artists, we're both looking at the same things. We're just acknowledging different features. Because, in art, we've always used plants and animals as subjects, but we're kind of taking it a step further, and we're actually incorporating them on a biological level into the art. So I think it's just taking a different angle. It's not really creating something completely new.
Yeah.
Is there beauty in a spinal cord?
Yeah.
I think what you're illustrating is that there can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like looking at the color because it's very different compared to like what you might have seen like in real life, not under the microscope. It's very different.
Oh, very different. I mean, I'm looking at Chris here right now, and I'm not seeing the colors that you showed in the background of your piece of art. So, what about influencing science? I mean, do you think it has any impact on your understanding of science, or your ability to understand science at all?
Well, again, I think it's what we learn things in our class that we can take into science. I was kind of both back and forth, the two-way street. And when I'm in my science classes, I can sort of look at things in an aesthetic view and think, how can I bring it to my art class, and how can I incorporate it into a project?
Yeah. So much of this, and when you talk about bio, it's things that are alive. So life is about beauty. It's also about trying to understand what keeps these things alive and well. So when you put those two things together, I mean, I'm trying to see the beautiful in this, I would imagine, right?
Yeah.
As a scientist, is that really part of your kind of worldview?
I mean, definitely. I think that, just the ability to, create like an ecosystem, like back to my project, create an ecosystem inside of a sphere, like there's sort of like a beauty in that, just the success of making an ecosystem. And I think that just the science alone is beautiful. I mean, if you can find it, you can appreciate it.
Right.
Yeah, whenever I create a project, I want others to appreciate the beauty of nature and just to like have another perspective on what it is.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about perspective. Maybe beauty is not the only world. I mean, do plants experience pain, and if so, can you demonstrate that in art that you cannot? I mean, is there some kind of sensitivity that they would have? We do know that they respond to color, to light, to darkness. I mean, so there is something going on there. So expressing it, I assume, in art.
Yeah. I mean, I think for like centuries, we've always like used human beings and like worship human beings in pictures and then glorified them through art. But now it's sort of like plants turn, because we're looking at plants and we're seeing, how magnificent they are and how amazing they are. And we want to sort of highlight that in our work. And I think it's sort of time that we give them attention.
And growing them below surface in the water may in fact change them somewhat, and you're going to be able to do both things. I mean, from
And
a
it's-
scientific point of view, but also record it as an artist.
Definitely.
So,
I'm sorry.
Go.
And with a deep respect for the plants and the organisms we use, I mean, that's really important to the whole program as well. I mean, that's something, a lot of research will go into this type of project before, ants are used or fish.
Put
So,
them into
Right.
water.
yeah, and that's very important. And, that brings it also into the environmental perspective as well, because there is a big environmental aspect of bioart, and that's what's fueling a lot of bioart currently.
Right. Down to the last minute. Closing thoughts. You recommend it?
Of course.
I could just see the grin on your face.
Yeah.
Both of you, I can see it right there. Okay.
I think it's
You could
rare
just answer that question.
I think it's rare in school to be able to take two interests and really blend them together into one class or a program. I think that we should bring this idea to, different topics and bring it to more schools.
Right.
Yeah, I also think it's very important to like express your ideas and just to portray them for other people to see, because it's very important that like you can get a look into other people's minds.
Great. Well, thank you all
Well
for
said.
joining me today, and thank you. I hope
you.
you've enjoyed this as much as I have. A little bit of an adventure for our students. We are kind of exploring a whole new world of joining science and art, and I hope you've enjoyed as much as I have the opportunity that some of our students here at Southside have to experience. So you can live it with us a little bit each day. So thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next time. Bye now.